Let's get into this message. Disciplines and discipleship. Disciplines and discipleship, part 4. Who has caught 2 out of these 4, including today? 2 out of these 4. Yeah, sure. You watched it later? Half. It's a half point. No, I'm just kidding. So 2 out. Okay, great. If you ever want to go back, you can and catch up. And I hope that this is an encouragement to you. I think that what we're studying here are things that can really create a strong foundation in your life, especially as it relates to your relationship with God. And today, I mentioned last week that this would be like part 2 of a mini series kind of within a series focusing on spiritual formation. So today, we're going to talk about something I'm really excited about. This message is called Solitude and Sabbath. Solitude and Sabbath. Now, to be honest, there is so much more that we could dive into than we're covering in these 4 weeks about following Jesus and being his disciple. And I would say, like, if you want to even go deeper in that, over this next year at our team nights on Wednesday, which is the 3rd Wednesday of every month, we're shifting it this year, the 3rd Wednesday of every month, there is going to be an opportunity to go deeper into these topics. And we're really trying to pour into our team in a discipleship way. And so if you're like, oh, I would love to know more about this, or I would love to see this be enhanced or grow in my life, I would just encourage you, come to team nights 3rd Wednesday of every month, and you'll get that chance. But Luke chapter 5, verse 16 will be our first verse today. It says this: "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, the whole purpose of this series is we're trying to examine the life of Jesus and how we can not just look at him as an example, but as a person that we actually can live like. Now, obviously, we're not going to be Jesus, but his Holy Spirit does live inside of us and enables us to live a life like him. And Jesus practiced solitude. It says he often withdrew to lonely places. Now, understand that there are different personalities in this room. And there's our first kind of point today is the introvert and extrovert paradigm. You fall somewhere in this spectrum between introvert and extrovert. How many people are extroverts? See, I asked you first because I knew you would have no problem raising your hands. I'm not even going to ask the introverts because they're just like dying. Like, oh my gosh, somebody might ask me this question. So the introvert-extrovert paradigm, we're all somewhere in that spectrum. I think that for an extrovert to think about doing something like Jesus did, withdrawing to lonely places and praying, is almost like asking somebody who's afraid of heights to go skydiving. Like, you want me to get away from people and you want me to withdraw and be by myself. That frightens me. And I think in general in our culture, even if we're not an extrovert, we are kind of a little bit afraid of silence. Like, if I just was silent here for 1 minute, everyone would feel uncomfortable. We hate quietness. We fill our lives with so much noise. And so the idea of getting away and disconnecting is honestly hard to even comprehend. But when we don't do that and our life is so full of noise, we find that it's very hard to hear heaven, to hear God. We all need solitude. If Jesus had to get away, then we all need times to get away and to get alone with God. Now, I said introvert-extrovert paradigm. What I would call Jesus, what he's doing here, what I would call that is healthy isolation. Healthy isolation. Because there is an unhealthy isolation. And some of us introverts may be prone to that. You have to know yourself and know where your pitfalls are. For the introvert, what I would encourage you in this concept about getting alone is that this is not me time. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily with having me time, but this is not Jesus saying, I just need some me time. Let me get alone, let me just do what I like to do. This is Jesus and God the Father. It's actually engagement with a person still. but it's disengagement with the world and the culture around us that's causing so much noise, and it's allowing ourselves to hear from heaven. It's a healthy isolation. Now, Jesus, if you're like, I'm just too busy, like I've got way too much going on to even think about withdrawing to a lonely place for a little while and praying, can I just encourage you today that I don't know how busy you are, but I can guarantee you that you are not more busy than Jesus. There was no person in the world who had more expectation of them than Jesus did. People wanted his time. People wanted his attention. People wanted what he could do for them. And 24/7, someone was always asking for something from Jesus. So Jesus, even though he was incredibly busy, still found time. And I would actually say, if you're busy, you need to prioritize this even more. If you have a lot of people depending on you, then you need to do this even more. Martin Luther, the great reformer, he said, I pray for 2 hours every day, unless I'm extremely busy, and then I pray for 3. Because he understood that in order for him to be effective, he had to withdraw and spend time alone with God. Listen, this needs to be a priority in our schedule. My question to you is, when was the last time you withdrew to a lonely place and prayed? Now, it doesn't mean, for Jesus, I think it necessitated that he actually left and walked away somewhere because people were always surrounding him. You might not have to actually get up and go somewhere. You might need to. You might need to actually get away for a little bit, or to go on a trip, or to spend time wherever. But you could also just wake up a little bit earlier, or not do something like watch Netflix right before you go to bed. You could withdraw even in your house if you are strategic about it and you find the right time. I'm not telling you neglect your relationships and your family. I'm just saying there's pockets of times where you can find a chance to withdraw to a lonely place and to pray. And it says that Jesus did this often. He didn't do this every once in a while. And if I'm being honest, and if we're being honest, I think that we would probably put ourselves in the category of we sometimes do this. Sometimes I withdraw to a lonely place and I pray. But Jesus did this often. The reason why is because the secret to Jesus' success was secret time with God. The secret to Jesus' success was secret time with God. I wrote this down. We're going to put it on the screen. It's what you do in private that prepares you for what... Oh, sorry. I have 2 things written here. I'll say this. It's what you do that no one sees that prepares you for the things that everyone sees. Joe Burrow is a really good quarterback. I mean, you know where I'm at, because look at the colors in my hat. You can figure out who I'm rooting for. But Joe Burrow is a really good quarterback, and he was talking about don't buy into all this hype about trying to show how good you are or what you do to prepare or whatever. Let your game do the talking. You see, Jesus would withdraw to lonely places and pray, and then when he would come out in public, he was powerful because he had spent private time with God. And Jesus did not intend for what he did to draw attention to himself. Now, this is very countercultural because we live in a world, in a day and age, where everything you do feels this pressure to document it. Okay, I got to take my phone with me. I got to take a picture of this. I got to take a video of this. I can't just do it. I've got to show everyone that I'm doing it. And this has seeped into our spiritual lives as well, where you see the perfectly posed picture of the person with their cute outfit on in the morning at 6 a.m. with the steam coming off of their coffee and their Bible open. And the truth is that they haven't even read that. They just took a picture of it before, and who knows how long that moment's going to last, you know? But we want to show everyone, this is me doing my spiritual thing. But Jesus, the purpose of it wasn't that. He went away to a place that no one saw him. And I just think if we could understand this, if our culture and our generation could understand this, that there's things you do that no one sees, and that no one will ever see except God. And that is okay. And what you do in secret, God will reward in public. You don't have to draw attention to it. You don't have to make a big deal of it, because God's the one who you're trying to please, and he sees it, and he will reward it. I just think if we could really get a grip on that, it's so countercultural to do this. And Jesus didn't do this for the purpose of telling everyone about it. He did it for the purpose of, I need to connect with my Heavenly Father. You know, Jesus was the best prayer. Jesus had an attractive prayer life. That's kind of a weird thing to say, I feel like. An attractive, it's like, oh, your prayer life's just so attractive. I want to be a part of that prayer life. But it's like, it's true. Here's what I mean. Look at Luke chapter 11, verse 1. The disciples have a chance to ask Jesus a question about his personal life. Can you imagine if you had a chance to ask Jesus a question about his personal life and what you could learn from him? What would your question be? But this is the question they asked. Now, Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray. There was something so attractive about Jesus' prayer life that others around him wanted to know how to have that. Jesus had such a great relationship with his Father that other people wanted that. And I was just thinking as I was preparing this message, is there anybody in your life who sees your relationship with God? And that doesn't mean that you're like flaunting it or pushing it down people's throat, but you aren't trying to hide it either. You're just who you are. And there's something so real and authentic and genuine about that someone might come to you. Is there anybody in your life who might come to you and say, how do I have a relationship with God like that? Because that's what prayer is, right? It's a conversation with God. So it's a gauge of your relationship with him. So does anybody in your life come to you and say, how can I have a relationship with God like you have? And maybe you're here today and you're like, well, I don't even really know how to have a relationship with God like that. There's also no shame in asking someone who you know has a strong relationship with God what you can learn from them. But I was just thinking, if you're like looking for a mission for your life, if you're looking for a mission statement, maybe you don't have something really strongly on your heart that God's given you. Honestly, I would say you could adopt this, and this would be great. If the mission of your life is that because of your life, people would want to know how to have a relationship with God. Because of your life, people would want to know how to have a relationship with God. If that was your motto, if that was your Facebook bio, if that was on your gravestone, that would be a successful life. Yeah. And I hope in my life, maybe make it a tattoo. Because of my life, I want other people to be curious and want to have a relationship with God. So Jesus often withdrew to solitary places, to lonely places, and he prayed. So when are you going to do that this week? When are you going to get alone with God? Get away from the noise and just connect with him. So that's solitude, but then there's also Sabbath. Now, this is really countercultural. Jesus was someone who observed and practiced the Sabbath. He lived in a time where that was customary, and he followed the rules about the Sabbath, the law, and he did it because he was also following in his Father's footsteps. Genesis 2 and 3. It says this about the Sabbath. On the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. God the Father gave us an example of resting that he wanted us to follow, and Jesus followed that example. Now, I'm not going to get super in-depth as to what the Sabbath is. I actually gave a whole message on the Sabbath. Back in September, we had a weekend that we didn't do in-person services. We called it Sabbath Sunday. You can go back and check that out, or maybe find a book on it from John Mark Comer or something. But I'm not going to re-preach that, but I just want you to understand that Jesus practiced the Sabbath. And Sabbath in Hebrew, the word Shabbat, it just means to rest. That's all it means, to rest. So think about this. Going back to Jesus as an example, he's the most productive person that's ever lived, the most powerful person that's ever lived, the most effective leader that's ever lived, the smartest person who's ever lived, the most historically significant person who's ever lived. And he took one day off every week. Do you think you have to work harder to get ahead? What if there was power in your rest? What if your rest actually made you sharper and stronger and better to go out and do what God had called you to do? Now, I said this is countercultural, right? Like, we live in a world that just pushes, be productive, get results, work hard. And there's nothing wrong with working hard. I mean, like, don't miss the first part of the commandment of the 10 Commandments. It doesn't start off with the Sabbath. It says, 6 days you shall work, and 1 day you shall rest. So if you're not working, start there, then get to rest. You know, some of us were like, we're already taking too much rest, right? But I think most of us, we aren't resting. And maybe you're taking a day off, but you're not really turning off. It's so countercultural because our world today is just on all the time. Screens all the time. Information all the time. News all the time. Entertainment all the time. Netflix, access it anytime I want. Go to places, I expect it to be, if you close early, if you close at 10 p.m., I'm like, why are you closed? I should be able to come and get a drink or get food or whatever. And places like Chick-fil-A are so bizarre in our world. Isn't that the weirdest thing? Doesn't that feel weird? We're like closed on, you can't be closed today. I need a spicy chicken sandwich. It feels like when you see a place like Chick-fil-A, even though in our country 40 years ago, that wasn't even strange. But when you see something like that, it feels foreign. It literally feels like it's from another country. That there's a place that would close for a day. And so we have to fight against this concept that we've got to work all the time. We need to take a break. We need to rest. Just like if you're working out, if any person, fitness trainer, they would tell you, like, take a break, right? Don't do the biceps 7 days a week. Like, your body needs a chance to recoup and to rebuild. And the same is true of your mind. The same is true of your soul. You have to take a break. Rest is good. That's the point. Rest is good. It's a good thing for you. If you don't take a break, you will break. You may work really hard, and you may even make some extra money or resources because of it, but at the end of the day, you're going to pay a price that's much heavier than what you took in. Like, your body's not meant to constantly be operating, and you'll find it will break down in certain areas of your life. Maybe your health will break. Maybe your emotional or spiritual health will break. Maybe your physical body will not operate as well. Maybe your relationships will break. Like, things will start breaking if you don't take a break. Rest is good. Listen, when you rest, you're blessed and you're less stressed. Took me a long time to come up with that. When you rest, you're less stressed and you're blessed. Anybody think that our society is stressed? Oh, yeah. We are stressed. And if we were to dig a little deeper, I think we'd find somewhere down deep, it's a performance issue. It's thinking we have to perform to be accepted. But we're stressed because we're trying to constantly get ahead and show that we're worthy and show that we're being effective and that we're good at what we do. No coincidence in this world that has increasingly taken less rest that we are also increasingly seeing horrible cases of mental health. Like, just mental health issues are on the rise like never before. Medication is going out like never before. People are breaking down like never before because we're not resting. And even if you don't, like, I think that it's weird because we advocate hard work, and at the same time, I think in this upcoming generation, there is a little bit more of an emphasis on work-life balance, and we do value that, and that's, I think, a good thing. But even if you are not working as hard, are you actually turning off at some point? Like, are you actually not on? You're actually even mentally. I'm disconnecting from work. I'm disconnecting from this thing that I'm supposed to be doing. And like, I'm not even thinking about that today. Because you're not really going to you're going to find yourself, even if you take a day off, but you're constantly analyzing things in your mind, you're going to get back and you feel like you didn't actually take a break. You have to rest. And when you rest, you are less stressed. Maybe some of you are like finding that you're getting really short-tempered with people. And it could be that you're just not giving yourself adequate rest. Like, maybe there's things that are kind of starting to, again, break in your life because you're just not resting and being less stressed. But also when you rest, you're blessed. There is a blessing, I think, that God puts on the practicality of taking that day off. Because it's almost like a faith step a lot of times. To say, okay, I'm not going to do this. I find this is hard for me. I'm not going to do this. And I don't know for sure if it's going to get done. Now, there's things that you can do to prepare for taking a break that will make it even better when you do take one. I'm not advocating like, oh, I didn't get anything done, but I'm just trusting the Lord. Like, no, you work hard 6 days, you take a break, but there, regardless of how hard you work, there's always going to be an element of trust in taking some time off. You're blessed. Listen, like, say what you want about Chick-fil-A. I truly believe they would not make as much money in 7 days as they do in 6. Because that's the way that they've chosen to honor God, is taking this day off. And I bet there's better longevity in their employees. I bet that there is a healthier culture. I bet, like, there are so many blessings that come when you just take a rest. You're less stressed and you're blessed. So here is my permission from me, if you care about it, but it's more from God, that it's okay to take a break. It's okay. In fact, you need to take a break, and don't feel guilty about the gift that God has given you in the Sabbath. Enjoy it. He meant for you to enjoy it. And if you're still struggling, maybe this will appeal to you if you're like really just, legalistic or whatever. Like, you're being disobedient if you don't take a break. So fight your guilt with more guilt. No, it doesn't really work well. But Jesus said that the Sabbath was supposed to be a blessing. It was supposed to be a break. In Mark 2:27, he says this: the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. He was saying, like, God gave this as a gift to mankind. He lived in a culture where they actually overemphasized the Sabbath, and they made it more work to keep the Sabbath than to not keep the Sabbath. Like, they were like, hey, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't walk more than this many steps. You have to, like, if your animal gets a broken leg, well, too bad, it's going to die. Like, it's just, it was just hyper legalistic and weird. And God was saying, hey, the Sabbath was made for man. I made it as a gift for you. So enjoy it as that. Don't make it about fulfilling the law. Jesus fulfilled the law for you. But make it about living a rhythm and routine that's sustainable and healthy and that's blessed by God. I'm excited because we could really dive deep into this, but next week at church, I just want to invite you back. Next week's going to be really fun because I'm not going to be preaching. And it'll be really good. We're going to have a panel of people from our church, and we're going to talk through these topics. And I think it's really going to be insightful and helpful. And maybe as we've gone through this series, some of the things that haven't quite hit practically will become more practical. And it'll almost be like a little dinner party discussion at church. I'm really looking forward to that. But the Sabbath is good. You're less stressed. You're blessed. It reminds you of what's important, which is people. And that the fact that time is the most valuable possession that we have. And it gets you refocused and recentered. I love the time with my family when I take that break. And I know that it's precious times. So, I said that Jesus took a day off, but there is another sense in which Jesus doesn't take any days off. Matthew 12:8, I want to read this verse to you. It says, "For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Now, if you read the context of this chapter, the Pharisees were giving him a hard time about doing something really silly, like picking grain on the Sabbath, because it went against their rules, not God's rules. But Jesus cites back to them several instances in Scripture where people did things like this on the Sabbath. And then he was saying, and the Son of Man is a Lord of the Sabbath. What is Jesus trying to say here? It's this: Jesus works while you rest. Jesus works while you rest. The Sabbath rules, even though God set them up in creation when he made the earth, did God actually need a break? No, we needed a break. And so God set an example for us to follow. But is God like, oh, sorry, can't get to you today. This is my day off. No, God's always working. And I think that you actually even walk into this blessing of God working an even greater way on your behalf when you decide to choose to rest. Jesus continues working while you rest. And there's some of you, you're trying in your own strength to get things done, and you just can't get them done. I wonder if you just take a break, if you would watch God get it done. If you would make the choice to say, I'm going to trust him, if you would see God work on the thing that is just bugging you and is on your mind and is troubling you. Jesus works while you rest. It's backwards. This is our last point. It's backwards. There's a lot in the Bible that's backwards. And we can go ahead and have the band come up. There's a lot in the Bible that is backwards. The first shall be last. The meek shall inherit the earth, not the strong or the powerful, the meek. The servant is the greatest. There are tons of examples in the Bible about things that are backwards. And the Sabbath is one of those things. In general, the Bible, it kind of like sometimes takes our presuppositions and it turns them on their heads. If you look in the Bible at the story of creation, like when you and I think about creation, we think about, or just a timeline, we think morning is the beginning of the day, right? Morning and then evening. But when you read through the story of creation, Genesis 1:5, Genesis 1:8, it says there was evening and then there was morning. So the day actually begins at night. It's backwards. And I think that we view the Sabbath as, I've worked really hard for 6 days, so now I'm going to take a break. But that's not really how it was set up. Because if you look again at the account of creation, when was mankind made? On day 6. So what was day 7? The Sabbath. Day 6 was when mankind entered the earth. Day 7, which is his first day, is a break. And what God is communicating through that is, I already did all the work for you. And so the Sabbath is not recouping after a hard time. The Sabbath is resting so you're ready to go. The Sabbath, you got to view it like the opposite. You got to view it backwards. I'm resting to go into what I need. I'm replenished. I'm strong. I'm equipped. I'm prepared. I'm going into this week from a place of rest, not for a place of rest. God always works backwards in that sense. And I love that we're doing a worship night tonight at the end of January. It's backwards, right? We're starting the year at the end of January with a worship night because we're saying, God, you are so worthy of our praise. It would be easier for us to not do the worship night just because the team has to get here early and set this up, and then we're here all day, and it's kind of challenging logistically to pull it off. But we're going to do it because God's worthy of our worship. God's worthy of our praise, and I'm going to give him my first and my best. You rest before you begin. Look at this, Hebrews 4:9-11. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for whoever has entered God's rest has also rested from his works as God did from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience. This is the message of Jesus. He is our Sabbath rest. He did the work for us on the cross. And when he said, "It is finished," is when our life began. He did it for us. He accomplished it for us. There's nothing you have to add. Jesus works while you rest in him. And while you understand the love of the Father through him, and as you rest in him, his Spirit rests on you. His peace rests on you. His love rests on you. His acceptance rests on you. His forgiveness and his grace, it rests on you. And so you can move forward from a place of victory and not for victory, from acceptance and not for acceptance, from love and not for love, because God has done the work for you in Jesus Christ. God, thank you for your presence here this morning. Thank you that you invite us to enter your rest. God, help us to choose to believe that the work is already done, that there's not anything we have to add to it, but you already accept us in Jesus Christ. God, we love you, we glorify you, and we worship you this morning. In Jesus' name, let's stand and